Have you ever noticed that after spending time with certain people, your mind feels restless and your heart feels tired, even when nothing bad was said? You sit with them, you laugh, the moment passes normally. But when you're alone again, something feels off. Buddhism teaches that this feeling is not weakness, it is awareness about who nourishes your spirit and who quietly drains it. Not everyone who stays close to you belongs in your inner world. Some connections slowly steal your peace without you realizing it. Not all closeness is meant to be kept. Buddhist wisdom reminds us that peace is your natural state, and anything that repeatedly disturbs it is gently showing you what no longer belongs. Letting go doesn't mean you stopped caring. It means you have learned to listen to your inner truth. Once you stop holding on to what drains you, your energy shifts, your heart becomes lighter, your mind becomes clearer, and happiness begins to return naturally. Today you will understand why letting go is not abandonment, but an act of wisdom, and how releasing the wrong people is often the first step toward real happiness. At the end, I'll guide you into gentle journal prompts made for letting go and finding calm. 1. Some people enter your life to teach you when to walk away. Buddhism teaches that life is a series of meetings and partings, and that not every person who enters your life is meant to remain there forever. Some people arrive quietly, others arrive with intensity, but each carries a purpose. Their purpose is not always to stay. Often it is to reveal something within you that you could not see before. Through them, you begin to understand your limits, your emotional patterns, and the places where you abandon yourself to keep a connection alive. These encounters are not accidents. They are lessons shaped through experience rather than words. Some people teach you patience by repeatedly testing it, showing you how much you can endure before you begin to lose yourself. Some teach you boundaries by crossing them again and again, forcing you to realize that kindness without limits turns into self-neglect. Others teach you self-worth by making you feel unseen or undervalued, until you finally recognize that love should never require you to shrink, explain yourself constantly, or accept emotional pain as normal. These lessons are often uncomfortable because growth rarely feels gentle at the beginning. When the lesson has been learned, holding on does not bring peace, it brings suffering. Buddhism explains that suffering arises from attachment, especially attachment to what no longer supports our inner balance. Many people continue relationships long after they have become harmful, not because there is love, but because there is fear. Fear of being alone, fear of starting over, fear of admitting that something ended. Buddhism does not treat endings as failures. It sees them as natural changes. Letting go is not a sign that you didn't try enough. It is a sign that you are finally listening to yourself. When a relationship brings more confusion than clarity, more anxiety than calm, and more emotional tiredness than warmth, it is no longer in line with your inner path. You may start to notice your mind is always restless, replaying talks, worrying about reactions, or preparing explanations. Your heart no longer feels safe. Instead of growth, you feel tension. Instead of peace, you feel pressure. Buddhism teaches that this inner disturbance is a message. It is your awareness asking you to stop holding on to what breaks your harmony. Walking away in such moments is not rejection, it is recognition. You recognize that peace is not something you must earn by suffering. You recognize that your emotional well-being matters. You recognize that not everyone who walks beside you is meant to walk with you forever. Some people are meant to walk with you only long enough to show you what you must heal, what you must protect, and what you must never again tolerate. In Buddhist understanding, walking away does not mean closing your heart with bitterness or anger. It means opening your eyes with clarity, It means releasing attachment without hatred and choosing awareness over habit. You allow the relationship to end without carrying resentment forward. You accept that its purpose has been fulfilled. When you do this, endings stop feeling like loss and begin to feel like relief. You step forward lighter, calmer, and more aligned with yourself, understanding that true happiness begins the moment you stop forcing connections that cost you your inner peace. 2. Attachment to the wrong people creates inner chaos. Buddhism teaches that attachment is one of the deepest sources of human suffering, especially when we attach ourselves to people who disturb our inner balance. When you remain close to the wrong people, your mind is rarely at rest. Even when nothing is openly wrong, there is a constant undercurrent of tension. You begin to measure your words, adjust your behavior, and suppress your true feelings just to keep the connection stable. Over time, this creates inner chaos. Your thoughts grow louder, your emotions feel heavier, and your natural calm slowly fades away. Attachment to the wrong people often hides behind loyalty, love, or responsibility. You tell yourself that leaving would be selfish, that accepting discomfort is part of caring, or that things will get better if you try harder. Buddhism teaches that this is how attachment traps the mind. Instead of creating closeness, it creates fear. Fear of being misunderstood, fear of conflict, fear of losing approval. When fear enters a relationship, peace quietly steps out. You may notice your body reacts before your mind understands. Your chest tightens, your breathing becomes shallow, and your nervous system stays alert even during rest. As attachment grows, you begin to lose clarity. You overthink small moments. You replay conversations in your head. You start doubting your own emotions and intuition. This mental noise pulls you away from the present moment, which Buddhism teaches is the only place where peace lives. Instead of being fully present, your attention is split between worry, expectation, and emotional fatigue. This is inner chaos, and it becomes stronger the longer attachment stays unseen. Buddhism explains that peace cannot survive where the mind feels unsafe. When you are attached to people who constantly criticize you, ignore your boundaries, or drain your emotional energy, your mind never truly rests. Even happy moments feel brief because you are always waiting for the next disturbance. This is not because you are weak, it is because the environment is out of alignment with your inner nature. A restless environment creates a restless mind. Letting go of the wrong people slowly brings order back inside you. When attachment loosens, the mind becomes quieter, little by little. You stop reacting to every word and action. You begin to breathe more fully. Your thoughts slow down. Buddhism teaches that clarity returns when attachment releases its hold. You start seeing situations as they are, not as you fear them to be. You no longer mistake emotional intensity for connection or suffering for loyalty. In this clarity, you realize that inner chaos was never your true nature. It was only the result of holding on to what disturbed your balance. When you release attachment to the wrong people, you are not losing something valuable. You are reclaiming your natural state of calm. And in that calm, happiness begins to take root quietly, without force, exactly as Buddhism teaches. 3. The wrong people keep you trapped in old versions of yourself. Buddhism teaches that everything in life is constantly changing, including who you are. Growth is natural, and transformation is part of the human journey. But when you remain surrounded by the wrong people, your growth begins to slow. Some people do not see who you are becoming. They only see who you used to be. They remember your past mistakes, your old fears, and your earlier limits, and they relate to you through that outdated image. When you stay close to them, you are quietly pulled backward even while your inner self is trying to move forward. The wrong people often bring up your past in subtle ways. They repeat old stories that no longer define you. They doubt your growth. They question your intentions when you try to live differently. Over time, this creates inner conflict. You start to feel torn between respecting your growth and keeping their approval. Buddhism teaches that this conflict creates suffering because it ties you to an identity that no longer matches your true state. You are no longer living fully in the present. You are being anchored to the past. When you remain in these relationships, you may notice you begin acting like an older version of yourself. You react instead of responding and fall back into familiar emotional patterns. You quiet your wisdom to avoid being misunderstood. Even when you try to improve your life, something inside feels heavy, as if you are moving ahead while being held back at the same time. Buddhism explains that this heaviness is a sign of misalignment. Your outer world has not caught up with your inner growth. Buddhism teaches impermanence, the understanding that nothing stays the same. Holding on to people who cannot accept your growth is another form of attachment. It keeps you tied to identities that were once needed but are no longer required. Growth needs space. Awareness needs freedom. When you are constantly reminded of who you were, it becomes hard to fully step into who you are becoming. Letting go of the wrong people creates that space. It allows you to release the weight of old expectations and outdated roles. You no longer feel the need to explain your changes or defend your evolution. Your mind becomes clearer because it is no longer split between the past and the present. Buddhism teaches that peace appears when you live in alignment with your current truth, not your former self. When you step away from those who keep you trapped in old versions of yourself, you give your growth room to breathe. You begin to act from awareness rather than habit. You respond with clarity instead of fear. In this freedom, happiness grows naturally because you are no longer living someone else's memory of you. You are living your own present reality, fully and honestly, just as the path of Buddhism encourages. 4. Peace is a clear sign of the right direction. Buddhism teaches that peace is not something you need to search for outside yourself. It is a natural signal that appears when your life is moving in the right direction. Your body, mind, and heart are always communicating with you, quietly guiding you toward what is aligned and away from what is harmful. When you are around the wrong people, even if nothing is openly wrong, your inner state changes. Your mind becomes restless, your thoughts scatter, and your body carries tension that does not easily release. This is not coincidence. It is awareness trying to get your attention. When a relationship is out of alignment, peace slowly fades away. You may notice conversations leave you feeling drained instead of supported. Your energy drops after spending time with certain people. Your sleep becomes lighter, your patience shorter, and your emotions less steady. Buddhism teaches that these signs are not weaknesses, they are signals. The mind and body are responding to an environment that does not protect your inner balance. Peace cannot live where there is constant emotional pressure. Buddhism highlights mindfulness, the ability to observe without judgment. When you observe closely, you start to see how different people influence your inner state. With the wrong people, you may feel the need to explain yourself all the time, defend your choices, or hide parts of who you are. Even moments of laughter feel tight because you are expecting the next emotional shift. Your nervous system stays alert and never fully rests. This is not harmony, this is survival. When you begin to let go of the wrong people, something quiet but powerful happens. At first, there may be silence, and there may even be loneliness. But beneath that silence, there is relief. Your breath becomes deeper, your thoughts slow, and your mind feels clearer. Buddhism teaches that peace often arrives softly, not as excitement, but as the absence of disturbance. This calm is not emptiness, it is alignment returning. Peace is one of the clearest signs that you are honoring your true path. When you step away from relationships that create tension, your inner world becomes steadier. You begin to respond instead of react and stop expecting conflict. You feel more present in your own life. Buddhism teaches that this calm awareness is not accidental. It is the natural result of living in line with your inner truth. Following peace does not mean escaping challenges or discomfort in life. It means avoiding unnecessary suffering created by misaligned connections. When peace grows stronger in your life, you begin to trust it as guidance. You learn that happiness is not found in forcing relationships to work, but in choosing environments and people that allow your mind to rest. In that rest, clarity deepens and happiness unfolds naturally, exactly as the Buddhist path teaches. 5. Letting go is an act of compassion, not cruelty. Buddhism teaches that compassion is at the heart of all wise action, but compassion is often misunderstood. Many people believe compassion means enduring pain, sacrificing inner peace, or staying in relationships that harm them in order to avoid hurting others. Buddhism offers a truth. True compassion never requires self-destruction. When you remain in a relationship that consistently drains your energy, disrespects your boundaries, or disturbs your inner balance, you are not practicing compassion. You are practicing neglect toward yourself. Letting go is often labeled as cruel because it challenges emotional attachment. People fear that walking away means abandoning, rejecting, or failing someone. But Buddhism teaches that clinging to what causes suffering only multiplies pain for everyone involved. When a relationship is held together by guilt, obligation, or fear, neither person is truly at peace. Compassion is not forcing closeness where harmony no longer exists. Compassion is recognizing when separation is the most honest and gentle path forward. From a Buddhist perspective, holding on to resentment, frustration, or silent suffering creates negative mental states that cloud the mind. These states eventually turn into anger, bitterness, or emotional numbness. Letting go early, with awareness, prevents this damage. When you release a relationship calmly, without hatred or blame, you stop the cycle of suffering before it deepens. This is compassion in its purest form. You choose clarity over conflict and understanding over emotional chaos. Buddhism also teaches compassion for oneself as an essential practice. You cannot offer genuine kindness to others while continuously harming your own mental and emotional well-being. When you let go with awareness, you are honoring your own limits and acknowledging your humanity. You accept that you are not meant to carry every emotional burden placed upon you. This self-compassion restores balance and allows your heart to remain open instead of hardened by pain. Letting go with compassion does not mean closing your heart or wishing harm upon the other person. It means releasing the expectation that they must change for your peace to exist. You allow them to follow their own path, just as you follow yours. Buddhism teaches that everyone is responsible for their own awakening. By stepping away peacefully, you respect that truth without trying to control outcomes. When letting go is done with compassion, it leaves no emotional poison behind. There is no need for revenge, harsh words, or dramatic endings. There is only quiet understanding. You accept that the connection has reached its natural end. In this acceptance, the heart remains soft, the mind remains clear, and the soul remains free. Buddhism teaches that happiness grows from this gentle strength, where compassion guides decisions and inner peace is never sacrificed in the name of attachment. 6. Solitude heals what no crowd ever could. Buddhism teaches that solitude is not something to fear, but something to understand deeply. After letting go of the wrong people, many experience a quiet phase in life where the noise fades and the world feels slower. At first, this silence can feel uncomfortable, even painful, because most people are conditioned to measure their worth through constant connection, validation, and presence of others. When those external voices disappear, the mind does not know where to rest. But Buddhism teaches that this discomfort is not emptiness, it is the beginning of healing. When you are constantly surrounded by people, especially the wrong ones, your attention is always pulled outward. You react, respond, adjust, and adapt. There is little space to hear your own thoughts clearly. Solitude removes these distractions. It creates a space where the mind can finally observe itself without interruption. In this space, emotions that were buried under social noise begin to surface. Old wounds, unresolved grief, and suppressed feelings rise not to harm you, but to be released. Buddhism teaches that healing cannot happen in avoidance. It happens in awareness. Solitude gives you the rare opportunity to meet yourself honestly. Without external influence, you begin to see how much of your behavior was shaped by fear of losing people, fear of judgment, or fear of being alone. You notice patterns that were invisible before. You recognize how often you compromised your peace to maintain connections. This awareness is not meant to shame you, it is meant to free you. Buddhism teaches that seeing clearly is the first step toward liberation. In solitude, the mind slowly begins to calm. Without constant emotional stimulation, thoughts lose their urgency. You begin to breathe more deeply. Your nervous system, no longer on alert, starts to settle. This calm does not arrive suddenly. It arrives gradually, like water becoming still after a storm. Buddhism teaches that this stillness is your natural state. It was always there, but it was hidden beneath noise, expectations, and emotional dependence. Many people mistake solitude for loneliness, but Buddhism makes a clear distinction between the two. Loneliness is the pain of wanting something outside yourself to fill an inner void. Solitude is the peace of no longer needing that external filling. When you sit with yourself without distraction, you begin to realize that you are not empty. You are full of awareness, presence, and quiet strength. You start to enjoy your own company, not because you reject others, but because you no longer abandon yourself. Solitude also rebuilds your sense of identity. When you are no longer defined by relationships that drained you, you begin to rediscover what truly matters to you. Your values become clearer, your priorities shift. You start making choices based on inner alignment rather than external approval. Buddhism teaches that this return to self is essential for genuine happiness. A mind that knows itself is not easily shaken by the opinions or behaviors of others. In this quiet phase, you may notice that your tolerance for chaos decreases. You become more selective with your energy. You no longer seek constant stimulation. You appreciate simplicity. A quiet morning, a calm walk, or a moment of stillness begins to feel deeply nourishing. Buddhism teaches that joy does not come from excess, but from presence. Solitude trains the mind to be present without needing entertainment or validation. Solitude also prepares you for healthier connections in the future. When you have spent time alone, you no longer enter relationships from need or fear. You connect from wholeness. You do not seek others to escape yourself. You invite them to share space with you. This changes everything. Boundaries become natural. Expectations become realistic. Attachment softens. Buddhism teaches that relationships rooted in awareness are free from suffering because they are not built on dependency. During solitude, compassion deepens. You become more patient, not only with yourself, but with others. You understand human behavior more clearly because you have observed your own mind closely. You recognize that everyone carries wounds, confusion, and fear. This understanding does not pull you back into unhealthy relationships. Instead, it allows you to remain kind without self-sacrifice. Buddhism teaches that wisdom and compassion must grow together. Solitude allows both to mature. Over time, solitude transforms from a phase into a foundation. Even when you re-enter social life, you carry this inner stillness with you. You are no longer easily disturbed. You do not fear silence. You do not chase attention. Your happiness becomes steady because it is no longer dependent on who stays or who leaves. Buddhism teaches that this is true freedom. A mind that is at ease with itself cannot be controlled by loss, rejection, or change. Solitude heals because it reconnects you with your true nature. It strips away false identities and emotional noise. It teaches you to sit with reality as it is, without resistance. In this space, wounds close naturally, clarity sharpens, and inner strength grows quietly. Buddhism teaches that happiness does not come from crowds, approval, or constant connection. It comes from a mind that has learned to rest within itself. And solitude, when embraced with awareness, becomes the doorway to that lasting peace. 7. The right people arrive when you stop settling for the wrong ones. Buddhism teaches that life responds to the state of your mind. When your inner world is confused, chaotic, or rooted in fear, your external relationships often reflect that same confusion. Many people unknowingly settle for the wrong connections, not because they truly want them, but because they are afraid of emptiness, silence, or being alone. They accept disrespect, emotional inconsistency, and imbalance simply to avoid facing themselves. Buddhism explains that as long as you tolerate what disturbs your peace, you continue inviting more of the same into your life. Settling for the wrong people slowly trains the mind to believe that peace must be sacrificed for connection. You begin to normalize anxiety, emotional exhaustion, and constant effort as part of relationships. Over time, you forget what calm companionship feels like. You confuse intensity with depth and attachment with love. Buddhism teaches that this confusion arises when awareness is clouded by desire and fear. Desire for connection and fear of loneliness push the mind to accept what is misaligned. When you finally let go of the wrong people, something shifts at a deep level. At first, there may be uncertainty. The familiar patterns are gone, the noise disappears, the mind feels exposed. But this is not loss, this is clearing. Buddhism teaches that emptiness is not negative. Emptiness is space, and space is necessary for anything new and healthy to enter your life. Without space, even the right people cannot reach you. As you stop settling, your standards change naturally, not because you become rigid or judgmental, but because your awareness deepens. You begin to notice how people affect your inner state. You pay attention to how your body feels around them, how your mind behaves, and how your heart responds. The right people do not create constant tension. They do not make you doubt yourself. They do not require you to perform or pretend. Buddhism teaches that harmony is felt, not forced. The right people feel calm. Conversations with them do not leave you drained. Silence does not feel awkward. There is mutual respect without constant explanation. You feel safe being yourself. This safety is not excitement or emotional highs. It is stability. Buddhism teaches that stability is far more valuable than emotional intensity because it supports peace rather than disrupts it. When you stop settling, You begin to recognize this difference clearly. Another change that occurs when you stop settling is that you stop chasing connection. You no longer try to convince people to value you, understand you, or stay. Buddhism teaches non-attachment, not indifference, but freedom from clinging. When you release the need to hold on, you become selective without effort. You allow connections to unfold naturally. Those who align with your values stay. Those who do not drift away without conflict. This is not loss. This is alignment. As your inner peace becomes more stable, your energy changes. You speak differently. You listen more deeply. You react less. This shift is subtle but powerful. Buddhism teaches that people are drawn to presence. When your mind is calm, you carry a quiet strength that does not seek attention. The right people recognize this energy. They feel at ease around you. They do not feel the need to compete, dominate, or control. They meet you as you are. Stopping settling also breaks old karmic patterns. Buddhism teaches that repeated suffering often comes from repeated choices made unconsciously. When you choose the wrong people again and again, you relive the same emotional pain in different forms. Letting go ends this cycle. You no longer repeat lessons you have already learned. Instead, you create space for new experiences that support growth rather than hinder it. The right people often arrive quietly. They do not enter your life through chaos or emotional storms. They come through simplicity. They may appear as friends, partners, mentors, or companions who respect your boundaries naturally. With them, you do not feel the need to explain your need for space or peace. They understand it. Buddhism teaches that when two aware minds meet, there is less suffering because there is less attachment and more understanding. It is important to understand that the right people do not complete you. Buddhism teaches that completeness comes from within. The right people complement your life, not fill a void. They walk beside you, not ahead of you, and not behind you. They respect your solitude as much as your presence. This balance is only possible when you have stopped settling for relationships built on fear or dependency. When you stop settling, you also become comfortable with letting people leave. You no longer see endings as threats. You understand impermanence deeply. Buddhism teaches that everything that arises will pass. When you accept this truth, you stop clinging to people out of fear. You appreciate connection without attachment. This mindset allows relationships to remain light, honest, and peaceful. Over time, you realize that happiness did not begin when the right people arrived. Happiness began the moment you stopped accepting the wrong ones. The arrival of the right people is a reflection of the inner work you have already done. It is the outer expression of inner alignment. Buddhism teaches that when the mind is clear, life becomes simple. You no longer struggle to find belonging. Belonging flows naturally. In this state, relationships stop being a source of suffering and become a source of shared growth. You support each other without losing yourselves. You communicate without fear. You respect silence. You allow change. Buddhism teaches that such relationships are rare, but they are only possible when you are no longer willing to trade peace for connection. The final realization is quiet but powerful. You understand that happiness was never about holding on. It was about knowing when to release. When you stop settling for the wrong people, you align with your true nature. From that alignment, the right people arrive naturally, without force, without struggle, and without suffering. 8. Letting go returns you to your true self. Buddhism teaches that beneath all roles, relationships, and identities, there is a natural self that is calm, aware, and whole. This true self is not loud. It does not chase validation. It does not fear being alone. But over time, especially through unhealthy relationships, this true self becomes buried. When you stay connected to the wrong people, you slowly move away from who you really are. You adapt, adjust, and reshape yourself to fit expectations that are not aligned with your nature. Letting go is the process of returning home to yourself. When you hold on to the wrong people, your identity becomes fragmented. Part of you knows something is wrong, while another part continues to tolerate it. This inner division creates confusion and exhaustion. Buddhism teaches that suffering grows when the mind is divided against itself. You begin to live externally, constantly monitoring reactions, moods, and approval. Over time, you lose touch with your inner voice. You stop asking what feels right and start asking what will keep others comfortable. This is how the true self becomes hidden. Letting go begins the moment you stop abandoning yourself. When you step away from relationships that require you to shrink, perform, or suppress your truth, awareness slowly returns. At first, this can feel uncomfortable. Without outside definitions, you may feel unsure of who you are. Buddhism teaches that this uncertainty is not a problem. It is a doorway. It is the mind releasing false identities that were never meant to stay. In this space, your true self begins to return naturally. As you spend time away from draining connections, you start noticing small changes. Your thoughts grow quieter, your reactions slow. You feel less pressure to explain yourself. You no longer feel the need to prove your worth. Buddhism teaches that when the mind is free from constant emotional strain, it returns to clarity. This clarity is not something new you build. It is something old you remember. The true self is simple. It enjoys stillness. It values honesty over approval. It feels content without constant stimulation. When you reconnect with this part of yourself, happiness feels different. It is not excitement or emotional highs. It is steadiness. It is ease. Buddhism teaches that this steady contentment is closer to liberation than any pleasure based on attachment. Letting go also clears false guilt. Many people feel guilty for choosing themselves because they were taught that self-sacrifice is love. Buddhism teaches that love without awareness becomes suffering. When you let go of the wrong people, guilt may appear at first, but as clarity deepens, guilt fades. You understand that protecting your inner peace is not selfish, it is responsible. A peaceful mind does not harm itself or others. Returning to your true self also strengthens intuition. When outside noise quiets, inner guidance becomes clearer. You begin trusting your feelings again. You notice discomfort early instead of explaining it away. Buddhism teaches that intuition is simply awareness sharpened through presence. Letting go sharpens this awareness. You become less likely to repeat old patterns because you can sense misalignment before it deepens. As the true self returns, you stop seeking identity through relationships. You no longer ask who you are based on who stays or leaves. You know who you are in stillness. This inner stability changes how you move through the world. You walk slower, you speak with intention, you listen more deeply. Buddhism teaches that when you are rooted in yourself, the world no longer pulls you off balance easily. Letting go also heals emotional dependency. You stop looking to others to regulate your emotions. You learn to sit with sadness without panic and with joy without clinging. Buddhism teaches that emotional maturity comes from allowing feelings to arise and pass without attaching identity to them. The wrong people often keep emotions stuck. Letting go allows emotions to flow naturally again. Over time, you realize that many of your fears were never about losing people. They were about losing yourself. And once you return to your true self, those fears lose their power. You understand that no relationship is worth abandoning your inner clarity. Buddhism teaches that the self that is aware cannot be lost. It can only be forgotten. The return to your true self is not dramatic. It is quiet and gradual. There is no sudden transformation. There is simply less resistance, less tension, less inner conflict. You feel more aligned even in ordinary moments. A simple breath feels grounding. A quiet evening feels complete. Happiness becomes less dependent on circumstances and more rooted in presence. In the end, letting go is not about removing people from your life. It is about removing confusion from your mind. When confusion dissolves, the true self stands clear. Buddhism teaches that this clarity is the foundation of freedom. And from this freedom, happiness arises naturally, not because everything is perfect, but because you are finally living in harmony with who you truly are. Buddhism teaches that true happiness is not something you chase or collect from the outside world. It is something you uncover when you stop betraying your own inner peace. Many people believe their unhappiness comes from loss, rejection, or loneliness. But Buddhism points to a deeper cause. Unhappiness often begins the moment you ignore your inner truth to keep someone else close. Each time you silence your intuition, excuse behavior that hurts you, or stay where your heart feels uneasy, you move further away from peace. This distance slowly turns into suffering. Inner peace is subtle. It does not shout. It does not demand attention. It whispers through discomfort, unease, and quiet resistance inside your body and mind. When you are with the wrong people, this whisper becomes constant. You may feel tired without knowing why. You may feel anxious even during calm moments. You may feel emotionally heavy after conversations that seem normal on the surface. Buddhism teaches that these are not random feelings. They are signals that your inner peace is being compromised. Betraying your inner peace often happens gradually. It rarely feels like a single dramatic choice. It happens in small moments. You ignore your need for rest to avoid disappointing someone. You tolerate disrespect to keep harmony. You stay silent when something hurts you because speaking feels risky. Each small compromise seems harmless, but over time they accumulate. Buddhism teaches that suffering grows not from one painful event, but from repeated moments of unconsciousness. When you repeatedly choose others over your own clarity, peace slowly dissolves. Many people confuse endurance with strength. They believe staying in difficult relationships proves loyalty or maturity. Buddhism teaches the opposite. True strength is awareness. True strength is knowing when something is harming your mind and choosing not to continue. Endurance without wisdom becomes self-harm. When you endure environments that drain you emotionally, your nervous system remains in a constant state of tension. Your mind becomes reactive. Your heart becomes guarded. Happiness cannot exist in this state because peace has already been sacrificed. When you let go of the wrong people, you stop this betrayal. At first, the mind may resist. Fear may arise. Doubt may surface. You may question whether you are making a mistake. Buddhism teaches that this resistance is attachment trying to protect itself. Attachment fears emptiness because it depends on external validation. But when you stay present through this discomfort, something shifts. The noise quiets. The inner conflict softens. You begin to feel relief that does not depend on anyone else's approval. Happiness, from a Buddhist perspective, is deeply connected to integrity. Integrity means living in alignment with your inner truth. When your actions match what your awareness knows to be right, the mind relaxes. There is less inner argument, less self-criticism, less regret. Letting go restores this integrity. You no longer have to pretend. You no longer have to justify your pain. You no longer have to explain why something feels wrong. You simply honor what you know. As peace returns, happiness begins to feel different. It is no longer excitement followed by exhaustion. It is steadiness. It is the ability to sit quietly without feeling empty. It is waking up without dread. It is breathing without tension in your chest. Buddhism teaches that this quiet happiness is far more stable than pleasure because it is not dependent on circumstances. It comes from alignment, not attachment. Another important shift happens when you stop betraying your inner peace. You stop seeking happiness through control. Many people try to control relationships, outcomes, or others' behavior in an attempt to feel secure. Buddhism teaches that control is rooted in fear. When you let go, you release this need to control. You accept impermanence. You understand that people will change, leave, or stay according to their own paths. This acceptance removes a huge burden from the mind. Happiness grows when resistance fades. You also begin to treat yourself differently. When you honor your inner peace, you listen to your needs without judgment. You rest when you are tired. You step back when something feels overwhelming. You stop forcing yourself into situations that drain you. Buddhism teaches that kindness toward oneself is essential for awakening. A mind that is constantly pushed beyond its limits cannot remain calm or joyful. Letting go restores gentleness in how you relate to yourself. Over time, you notice that happiness becomes quieter, but deeper. You laugh more freely. You feel gratitude for simple moments. A peaceful walk, a quiet meal, or a moment of stillness feels complete. You no longer need dramatic highs to feel alive. Buddhism teaches that contentment arises when desire softens. When you stop craving approval, validation, or emotional intensity, your mind becomes satisfied with what is already present. You also become less afraid of endings. When you no longer betray your inner peace, you trust yourself. You know that even if something ends, you will remain whole. This trust removes fear from relationships. You no longer cling. You allow connections to flow naturally. Buddhism teaches that when attachment loosens, love becomes purer because it is no longer mixed with fear. Eventually, you realize that happiness was never waiting on the right people, the right timing, or the right circumstances. It was waiting for you to stop abandoning yourself. The moment you choose peace over attachment, clarity over fear, and awareness over habit, happiness begins quietly, without announcement. Buddhism teaches that this is the path of liberation, not escaping life, but living it without inner conflict. When you stop betraying your inner peace, you stop fighting yourself. And when that fight ends, happiness is no longer something you search for. It becomes the natural state you return to again and again, simply by honoring the truth within you. 10. Letting go teaches you how to live without fear. Buddhism teaches that much of human suffering is rooted in fear, especially the fear of loss, rejection, and uncertainty. When you hold on to the wrong people, fear quietly controls your choices. You fear being alone. You fear being misunderstood. You fear starting over. You fear what might happen if you let go. This fear does not always feel dramatic. Often, it feels like hesitation, overthinking, or emotional dependence. You stay not because the relationship brings peace, but because fear convinces you that leaving would be worse. Buddhism teaches that this is how fear disguises itself as practicality. Living with fear slowly shapes your inner world. You begin to make decisions based on what will keep others close, rather than what keeps you balanced. You tolerate behavior that hurts you because confrontation feels risky. You silence your truth because honesty might create distance. Over time, fear becomes a constant background presence in your mind. Even moments of happiness feel fragile because you are always aware of how easily they could disappear. Buddhism teaches that a mind ruled by fear can never be truly free. Letting go is one of the strongest ways to face fear directly. When you release the wrong people, you are not only ending a relationship, you are confronting the belief that you cannot survive without it. At first, this feels unsettling. The familiar structure is gone. The mind searches for something to hold on to. Fear speaks loudly in this stage, telling you that you made a mistake, that you will regret the choice, that you are not strong enough to stand alone. Buddhism teaches that this fear is not a warning. It is attachment losing its grip. As you stay present with this fear, something important happens. You realize that fear does not destroy you. It rises, it peaks, and it passes. You learn that discomfort is temporary, but self-betrayal lasts. Buddhism teaches that courage is not the absence of fear. It is the willingness to stay aware while fear moves through you. Letting go builds this courage gently, without force. When fear no longer controls your decisions, your mind becomes clearer. You stop imagining worst outcomes. You stop rehearsing emotional pain before it arrives. You begin to trust your ability to adjust. Buddhism teaches that trust in yourself is essential for peace. This trust does not come from confidence in results. It comes from confidence in awareness. You know that whatever appears, you can face it without losing yourself. Living without fear does not mean living without challenges. Buddhism does not promise an easy life. It promises a free mind. When you let go of the wrong people, challenges still come, but they no longer threaten your sense of self. You face uncertainty without panic. You face change without resistance. You face endings without collapse. This is freedom from fear, not because fear never appears, but because it no longer controls you. Another fear that dissolves through letting go is the fear of being misunderstood. Many people stay in unhealthy relationships because they want to be seen as kind, loyal, or good. Buddhism teaches that attachment to image creates suffering. When you release the need to be understood by everyone, your mind relaxes. You stop explaining yourself unnecessarily. You stop defending choices that protect your peace. You accept that not everyone will understand your path, and that this is okay. Letting go also teaches you that safety does not come from people. It comes from awareness. When you rely on others for emotional stability, fear grows because you are always aware that they could leave, change, or disappoint you. Buddhism teaches non-dependence, not isolation, but inner stability. When you develop this stability, relationships become lighter. You connect without fear of loss because your peace no longer depends on their presence. As fear fades, authenticity grows. You speak more honestly. You listen more openly. You act more intentionally. You no longer mold yourself to fit expectations. Buddhism teaches that authenticity is a form of liberation. When you are no longer afraid of losing approval, you gain something far more valuable: inner alignment. This alignment brings a quiet confidence that does not need validation. Over time, you realize many of your past fears were created more by imagination than reality. You feared loneliness, but solitude taught you strength. You feared loss, but letting go brought relief. You feared emptiness, but space allowed peace to grow. Buddhism teaches that suffering often comes from resisting what is already unfolding. When you stop resisting and begin allowing, fear loses its grip. Living without fear also changes how you see the future. You stop obsessing over what might happen. You become present. You deal with life as it is, not as you imagine it could be. Buddhism teaches that the present moment is the only place where fear cannot survive. Fear lives in anticipation and memory. Presence dissolves it naturally. Eventually, you understand that letting go was not an act of loss, but an act of trust. Trust in life, trust in impermanence, trust in your own awareness. When this trust deepens, fear has nowhere to settle. You move through life with openness instead of defense, curiosity instead of control. This is the final gift of letting go. It teaches you how to live without fear, not by hiding from life, but by meeting life fully, honestly, and peacefully. Buddhism teaches that a fearless mind is not aggressive or hard. It is soft, flexible, and awake. From this state, happiness is no longer fragile. It becomes steady, grounded, and free. Freedom arrives when you stop clinging to who should stay. Buddhism teaches that clinging is one of the deepest causes of suffering, and clinging to people is often the most painful form. Many people carry an invisible list of who should stay in their life, who should understand them, who should care more, and who should never leave. This list is built from expectations, emotional investment, and hope. Buddhism teaches that the moment you decide who must stay, you also create fear, disappointment, and suffering. Freedom begins when you release this grip. Clinging does not always look dramatic. Often it appears as quiet attachment. You replay conversations in your mind. You wait for messages. You read silence as rejection. You hold on to memories to justify staying connected, even when the present no longer feels right. Buddhism teaches that this mental holding is where suffering truly lives. The person may be gone or distant, but the mind keeps them alive through attachment. Freedom cannot exist while the mind grips what is already changing. When you cling to who should stay, you stop accepting reality as it is. You begin negotiating with life inside yourself. You tell yourself that if you are more patient, more understanding, or more silent, the relationship will return to what it was. Buddhism teaches that this resistance to impermanence is a source of pain. Everything changes. People change. Connections shift. Trying to freeze a moment that has passed only creates frustration and inner conflict. Clinging also places your happiness in someone else's hands. When your peace depends on another person's presence, attention, or behavior, you lose inner freedom. Your emotions rise and fall with their actions. Your sense of worth becomes unstable. Buddhism teaches that this is bondage, not love. Love, rooted in awareness, allows movement. Attachment rooted in fear demands control. The difference is subtle, but its effect on the mind is deep. Letting go of clinging does not mean you stop caring. It means you stop controlling. You allow people to come and go without tying your identity or peace to their choices. Buddhism teaches that when you release the need to hold, you feel lightness. The tension in your chest softens. The mind stops replaying scenes. The heart stops preparing for disappointment. This is not emotional numbness. It is emotional freedom. One of the hardest attachments to release is the attachment to how things were supposed to be. Many people suffer not because of what happened, but because reality did not match their expectations. You imagined a future with certain people. You invested emotionally in that image. When it dissolves, pain appears. Buddhism teaches that suffering grows when we cling to imagined futures instead of accepting the present. Freedom arrives when you stop demanding that life follow your script. As clinging loosens, you begin trusting impermanence instead of fighting it. You understand nothing stays the same, and this truth no longer scares you. Instead, it frees you. You stop fearing loss because you stop defining yourself by what you hold. Buddhism teaches that the self is not built from possessions, roles, or relationships. It is built from awareness. Awareness remains even when everything else changes. When you stop clinging, your relationships change in quality. You no longer approach people with fear of abandonment. You do not overgive to secure closeness. You do not silence yourself to avoid conflict. You allow connections to breathe. Those who align with your values stay naturally. Those who do not leave without chaos. Buddhism teaches that harmony cannot be forced. It appears when attachment dissolves. Clinging also keeps old wounds alive. When you refuse to let go of certain people, you reopen the same emotional pain again and again. You revisit disappointment, rejection, or neglect. Buddhism teaches that healing requires release. You cannot heal a wound while constantly touching it. Letting go allows the mind to rest. In this rest, wounds close naturally without effort. Freedom also arrives when you stop clinging to approval. Many people stay attached because they want to be seen as good, kind, or loyal. Buddhism teaches that attachment to image is another form of suffering. When you release the need to be seen a certain way, your actions become honest. You choose peace, even if others misunderstand you. This honesty strengthens inner freedom more than approval ever could. As clinging fades, gratitude replaces grasping. You appreciate people for the time they shared with you, instead of resenting them for leaving. You understand not every connection is meant to last forever. Some are meant to shape you, teach you, and then end. Buddhism teaches that this understanding turns loss into learning and endings into wisdom. Eventually, you reach a quiet realization. Freedom does not come from holding tighter. It comes from allowing life to move freely. When you stop clinging to who should stay, your heart becomes spacious. Your mind becomes calm. Your happiness becomes independent. You no longer live in fear of loss because you are no longer trying to possess what was never meant to be owned. This is the deep freedom Buddhism points toward, not isolation, not detachment from life, but freedom from inner struggle. When clinging ends, suffering softens. When suffering softens, peace arises, and in that peace, happiness is no longer fragile. It is steady, grounded, and free, because it no longer depends on who stays or who leaves. 12. Peace becomes your home when you release the need to hold on. Buddhism teaches that peace is not a destination you reach after fixing your life or arranging your relationships perfectly. Peace is your natural state, but it becomes hidden when the mind is constantly holding on to people, to expectations, to outcomes, and to identities, creates tension. The mind tightens around what it fears losing, and this tightening becomes suffering. When you finally release the need to hold on, peace does not arrive from somewhere else. It reveals itself as something that was always within you. Many people believe peace will come once relationships stabilize, once others behave differently, or once life becomes predictable. Buddhism teaches that this belief keeps the mind restless. Life is impermanent by nature. People change, situations shift. Trying to secure peace by controlling what cannot be controlled only brings exhaustion. When you release the need to hold on, you stop fighting reality, and the moment the struggle ends, peace begins to settle on its own. Holding on can feel like love, responsibility, or loyalty, but Buddhism invites you to look deeper. Ask yourself what holding on truly feels like in your body and mind. Is there ease or tension? Is there openness or fear? Many people hold on because they are afraid of emptiness, silence, or uncertainty. They believe that without certain people or situations, they will fall apart. Buddhism teaches that this fear comes from misunderstanding where stability comes from. Stability does not come from what you hold, it comes from awareness. When you release the need to hold on, there is often a moment of stillness that feels unfamiliar. The mind may look for something to grasp. Old habits of attachment can appear again. This is not a sign that letting go was wrong. It is a sign that the mind is learning a new way to live. Buddhism teaches patience with this process. Just as muddy water clears when left alone, the mind becomes calm when you stop disturbing it. As you stay with this stillness, you begin to notice a quiet sense of safety that does not depend on circumstances. You realize that even without constant connection, validation, or reassurance, you are still here. You are breathing. You are aware. This realization is powerful. It shows that peace was never tied to holding on. It was tied to presence. When you are present, the mind relaxes because it is no longer chasing or resisting anything. Releasing the need to hold on also changes how you experience emotions. You let sadness arise without trying to fix it. You allow joy without clinging to it. You allow fear without letting it control you. Buddhism teaches that emotions are like waves. Holding on turns waves into storms. Allowing them to pass restores calm. When you stop gripping emotions tightly, they lose their power to overwhelm you. Peace becomes your home when you stop defining yourself through relationships. Many people unknowingly build their identity around who is in their life, who approves of them, or who depends on them. When those connections change, the sense of self feels threatened. Buddhism teaches that the self is not fixed or dependent on outside roles. It is a flow of awareness. When you understand this, changes in relationships no longer shake you at the core. You stay grounded, even as life rearranges itself. As peace deepens, you begin to move through the world differently. You listen more than you speak. You observe more than you react. You no longer feel pushed to chase every emotional impulse. This does not make you distant or cold. It makes you centered. Buddhism teaches that a centered mind responds with wisdom instead of habit. From this place, your actions become simpler and more aligned. Letting go of the need to hold on also softens the heart. When you are no longer afraid of loss, love becomes lighter. You love without possession. You care without control. You appreciate people without demanding permanence. Buddhism teaches that this kind of love is closer to compassion than attachment. It does not bind or limit. It allows space. And in that space, relationships become healthier because they are free from pressure. Peace as a home means you carry calm within you, regardless of what happens outside. This does not mean life becomes perfect. Challenges still arise, pain still visits, but there is a difference between pain and suffering. Pain is part of being human. Suffering comes from resistance. When you stop holding on, resistance dissolves. You meet pain with awareness instead of fear. Buddhism teaches that this is the end of unnecessary suffering. Over time, peace becomes familiar. You begin to trust it. You stop rushing to fill silence. You stop needing constant stimulation. You find contentment in simple moments. A quiet morning, a mindful walk, a gentle breath feels complete. This contentment is not boredom. It is fulfillment without craving. Buddhism teaches that this is a sign of true inner balance. When peace becomes your home, happiness is no longer something you pursue. It arises naturally from living without inner conflict. You no longer fight yourself. You no longer force life to match your expectations. You flow with change instead of resisting it. In this flow, happiness becomes steady rather than fragile. This is the quiet conclusion Buddhism points to. Not dramatic change, not constant joy, but a mind that feels at ease with itself. When you release the need to hold on, you stop carrying the weight of fear, expectation, and attachment. What remains is clarity, calm, and a deep sense of being okay as you are. In this state, peace is no longer something you visit once in a while. It becomes the place you live from. Buddhism teaches that happiness is not found by collecting more people, more approval, or more emotional intensity. It is found by releasing what disturbs the mind's natural peace. Throughout life, many people search for happiness outside themselves, believing the right relationships will complete them or protect them from pain. But suffering returns again and again, not because happiness is impossible, but because attachment keeps pulling the mind away from its center. Letting go of the wrong people is not an act of loss. It is an act of awakening. It is the moment you stop living against your inner truth and begin living in harmony with it. Each time you choose peace over attachment, clarity over fear, and awareness over habit, you move closer to your natural state. This state is not dramatic. It is quiet, steady, and deeply grounding. Buddhism reminds us that people come and go, circumstances change, and life stays uncertain. Trying to control these movements only creates tension. When you accept impermanence instead of fighting it, the mind relaxes. You stop clinging to who should stay. You stop fearing who might leave. You begin to trust yourself rather than outside conditions. This trust is the base of true freedom. Happiness begins when you no longer abandon yourself to keep others comfortable. It begins when you listen to the subtle signals of your body and mind and respect them without guilt. It begins when you understand that peace is not something you earn through suffering, but something you return to by releasing attachment. When the wrong people leave your life, they leave space behind, and in that space calm grows, awareness deepens, and self-respect strengthens. You start living with less inner conflict and more presence. The relationships that remain become lighter, more honest, and more balanced. Relationships that end no longer feel like failure, but like completion. In the end, Buddhism does not teach you to reject people or isolate yourself from the world. It teaches you to stop clinging. It teaches you to love without possession, to care without control, and to live without fear. When you let go of what no longer matches your peace, you are not losing happiness. You are finally allowing it to rise naturally, quietly, and steadily from within. You can pause this video and write if you want. Writing this is not just journaling, it's a way to release what your mind keeps replaying. When feelings reach the page, they become clearer, lighter, and easier to heal. Even a few honest lines can bring relief and calm. Don't overthink it, just write. This small moment with your journal can quietly help you let go. Ask yourself these questions for healing after letting go the wrong people. 1. Who am I afraid to let go of, and why am I still holding on? 2. What pain am I accepting just to keep this person in my life? 3. How has this relationship changed the way I see myself? 4. What would I gain emotionally if I chose to release them? 5. Who could I become once I stop carrying this attachment? Each honest sentence you write is a step back toward yourself, and that is where peace begins.